welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I am Chris Lucian, and my co-host is Austin Chadwick. And today we have Tom Ayerst with us, and we're going to talk a little bit about remote working, recapturing the Agile Magic, and making it work for everyone. But before we get into those topics, maybe Tom, you could give us a little bit of introduction and talk about how you got involved with ensemble programming and maybe the rest of your career.
Okay. Well, quick career background. Actually, I started in IT 40 years ago. I just realized that's scary, isn't it? But I only properly started 30 years ago programming an assembler in BA. I spent a while developing Java trading systems in the City of London. And while I was doing that, I kind of moved into less hands-on techie stuff, more architecting, team leading, fighting stakeholders, that sort of stuff. And then since then, I've been moving through other projects, and I mostly consult on agile transformations and DevOps these days. So my ensembling, I've always been I started with extreme programming when it started, pretty much. And so pair programming was always something I was very keen on and wanted to push to not great events, I must admit, during the noughties. Most developers many developers are resistant, as you know. And then when I was, some of my consulting work, we were using Ensemble to bring along apprentice technologists, new arrivals, done the boot camp, arrived on site, and then getting them up to speed. And I've been involved. I've been reading about Ensemble and things like that, and I wanted to give it a try. So, and then we just found that we're getting these guys who had joined the company a week before, committing code into production in a and also awesome. we were massively reducing single person risk, because they had a couple of people there who'd been there for 10 years and did everything and understood everything. And one of them, you may have met the type, like that, and he was the only one who understood anything. So, and then by doing the ensemble piece, we started distributing knowledge, not just to the apprentices, but also for their senior members of the team. So that was the big sort of wow light bulb. And then, so we tried that in a few more places to greater or lesser. We can talk about selling it later. But then lockdown happened, and Jeff Langer started his mobbing sessions, which I joined in and thoroughly enjoyed. And there's another thing I'd like to talk about later. It really works from the way I think, and not just the way I think, but the way I process ideas. And so I did that for a while. Then Jeff asked me to run a Europe version because the timing wasn't very good for him.
Yeah.
And so I ran that for a while, and then kind of everybody started. We basically, it ran into the ground. I mean, basically, people. we had a group of people, and they were quite loyal and kept at it. But we all realised after a while that it was getting harder and harder to maintain that momentum week on week. And that again is something we can talk about, because that there's a thing about context uploading when you're coding. Because everybody knows about you need your 15 minutes to get into flow. So I think it takes longer than that in an ensemble, because you've got a bunch of people doing it. And if you're doing and especially if you haven't seen the code for a week. So, and I think we certainly found it in Jeff's group, and we certainly found it in my group, is that you're spending an hour getting back up to speed to where you were the end of the week before, and then you're halfway through, and everybody's exhausted because it's all been like trying to get this in, and then if somebody new joined and they're even, so. But we did learn a lot about trying to get that context fast, and the tools you need alongside. Because I know that Woody talks about the code speaking to you, and that's very simplistic, but you need more.
Yeah, I'm curious. So I think I had experienced something similar before. And I think the way that we fixed it is always leaving with a failing test. So yeah, I mean, that was a little bit of like, this test is failing. It's the next thing that we want to have passing, and then people kind of naturally got into.
We tried that. Yeah, we did. And so the two things, the two things that so the thing is, getting the problem small enough that you can do it with a bunch of strangers once a week for a couple of hours.
Yes.
But keeping it big enough that you're not just doing relatively trivial katas every week.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I really like doing katas, but after a while, so I mean, when I first decided to do something in Europe, I was actually saying, we could build a product. And I had a chat with, by the way, my memory for names is absolutely abysmal. So I just say some guy. I'm really sorry, but they said, I don't think this is going to work because we just not going to get the momentum to do. People will either want to work on their own because they're excited, and we're going to say don't do that, or we're not going to have momentum. So, and that was really good advice. But I think you're right. There is this. You have to leave it on a point so that you've got a launch point when you restart. But I think there just is a problem with a week's gap.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not your day job of getting it started again. So finishing at lunchtime with the failing test, starting in the afternoon, that definitely works. We've done that. But leaving it for a week. And so that was the other thing that happened. We were trying to do refactorings. And of course, we had a fairly strict time box because people said, I've got to go now. And what we found again was that, and actually we found this again with Jeff's sessions, that you'd got maybe 3 different relatively strong-willed navigators who would set the tone for the session. Not they were navigating all the time, but they kind of set, this is the intention, this is where we're going. And then you end up, you've kind of got 3 different refactorings going in different directions after 3 sessions, and it's like, my God, this is awful. But on the other hand, that was also quite a good lesson about that. So the 2 things that we did take away, we would take away by the end, but we kind of lost momentum by then, was really small steps. So GPOs, many more.
Really, really small.
Yeah. What did he? I can never remember it. So GPOR, it's a lousy acronym. But very many, lots of small steps, and a reasonably and a consistent intention, even if you haven't got. If you're not sure, even if you don't know how you're going to get there yet, at least you know the direction you're going in. And then committing, making sure everything's working well, and finishing the refactorings, not stopping. And that was the problem, because we started one, and then at the beginning of the next week, it was like, what were we doing? I can't remember.
That makes sense, and that's totally valid. So maybe we should jump to the remote working piece. Something that you experienced both there and in the workplace. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
Oh, I mean, I'm a big fan of remote working for multiple reasons. For personal reasons, I don't have to travel as much because I spent a long time spending 3 or 4 nights a week living in a hotel room or an apartment on site because I was consulting with the organization. So working from home, working remotely is a lot better. And it's got a huge number of advantages. So I think Martin Fowler said, even long time before everything else, that you've got this trade-off between, you may not be as effective remote working, but you've got this massive pool of people you can access that you can't access if you are coming to an office. So you've extended that talent pool enormously. And there's a company now called Remote setting up in Europe, which will actually let you hire somebody as a permanent employee in another country, and they'll do all the legal and financial stuff for you. So you've got this enormous talent pool. So that's really valuable. And I was talking to a guy, Steve Walton, who's a testing guy I know, and he was saying, actually, it's easy to manage, because if you manage by outcomes, which you should, because we're agile, outcomes are really easy to manage remotely because you just need the outcome. It doesn't. If somebody can give you the outcome in 2 hours, great. Now, hopefully they're professional and competent and honest enough to say, I did that in 2 hours. I could probably do more, rather than just kicking back and watching Netflix for the rest of the day. But so you can do that, but on the other hand, you do get this. It's easy to end up in isolated groups, in isolated individuals. And somebody recently was saying that one of the problems with teams all working on their own tasks is that it's like multi-team coordination in miniature. So it's like, we've all doing that, and then we've got to coordinate. And this is stuff you've talked about before. And that's when ensembling comes in, because that coordination is just happens. Because they don't have to coordinate because you're all working on the same thing, or of a small subset of things. So it seriously reduces that coordination overhead. Coupling that with the current good practices, trunk-based development, continuous integration, that sort of thing, you can, I feel, you can mitigate most of the downsides of remote working. Now, it's still nice to see people face to face. So that's still a thing. There's an organization called, it's called the Remote Agile Framework, RAF. It's an Australian bunch who've launched it, but they're leaning into remote really hard. And they've got some really interesting takes on this. And I will get you some names because I can't remember them. So I think that the ensembling especially mitigates a lot of the issues that people have with remote working. So they are very strong. And the steps forward in tooling we've done over the last couple of years especially has made that even more likely to work. So a lot of the problems you had with that was either they were tools that were really hard to set up, or they were quite clunky. I mean, I actually still like mob, Git handovers, sharing screens serially that we did when we were running remotely. Though actually, we found in our remote sort of walk-up sessions that actually I had an EC2 instance with a Python IDE running, and that's where we all worked, and we just VNC'd into it. And that's better for walk-ups because you don't have that 20-minute, oh, somebody else has joined and we've got to set up on Git and all that stuff we used to do. On the other hand, for a team in an organization, I think the Git handover is still a very powerful thing because you've got everything set up.
Yeah.
Just the fact of looking at somebody else using their IDE is immense. That was one of the sort of light bulb moments with on Jeff's group. It's just like, oh, did you know you could do this keystroke? Oh, no, I didn't, and it's so good. So it's all that stuff is really valuable. And I think inside an organization where you're probably using the same IDE and you've all got access to the repos, I still think that would be that would still work. Though I can see why people want to. I mean, what's the VS Code tool?
Live share.
I mean, I must admit that is, I haven't gone back to IntelliJ for a while, but in terms of remote working, LiveShare kicks IntelliJ's version out of the park. Frankly, I think what we're seeing with IntelliJ, and I don't know, I get the impression that they made some architectural decisions a long time ago with IntelliJ, and unpacking those to do remote working is proving much harder than they expected. Whereas in VS Code was written inside a browser, so. But we'll see. But yeah, anyway, remote working is, I think, for coders, if you don't support full remote working, at least the point where you'll fly somebody in from their address to your office for monthly get-togethers or for bi-monthly get-togethers, I think you're going to find it hard and hard to hire good people, because you're just especially in, I mean, you're either going to be in London or Silicon Valley, where people will go, but it's really expensive, or you're going to be out in the sticks somewhere where it's really hard to get people at all. And if you then say, and you've got to come into the office every week, it's like, yeah, well, okay, well, I can be fully remote over there, so I'll go over there.
Yeah.
I saw a really interesting. There was I'm quite involved in the Elixir community, mostly as an observer. I'd much like to be doing a lot more coding, but I'm not. And actually, we're doing. There's a guy, Brooklyn. I can't remember his surname. He's running an ensemble in Elixir on Saturday evenings. He didn't realize he was. I told him that this is an ensemble, Brooklyn. Oh, really? Okay, that's good. So so that's and they've actually got they accidentally invented some tooling for doing shared remote coding. There's some really interesting tools they've got there, but in the Elixir community, there was a guy from Nigeria who set up an Elixir consultancy. And what was interesting, he was saying that somebody came to him and said, "Will you build something for us?" And they said yes, and said, "This is how much we charge." I said, "Well, that's really expensive." And so, "It's not really expensive." I said, "Well, but it is for Africa." I said, "But you're not in Africa." So why should why should we charge significantly less than everybody else because we're in Africa? The work's going to be just as good.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's economics, so we'll see. But it's interesting that there's going to be I don't know whether there's going to be this leveling down or this leveling up or this mixture. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think for sure the demand for developers is only increasing, even with the increased supply. So yeah,
because it's doubling like every 4 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
and I think it was about 4 years ago. Yeah, somebody said about 4 years ago there's about 23 million developers in the world, so there must be nearly 50 million by now. If the math still holds.
There's more than double. I forget the number, but it's something along the lines of more than double associate level developers to senior level developers every 2 years.
Wow.
I think that was the number. I'm not, don't quote me on that, but it's something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So there's all these people are going to be relearning all the lessons even more frequently than we have done we've all relearned the same lessons before. So it's
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had on the remote work thing, I had basically a question for you, and I guess I'll kick it off with a recent experience of mine. So before the pandemic, always in-person work for me. Never did remote work other than like checking emails or doing something really minor for a little bit of time. Pandemic came, we were doing in-person mobbing before, ensembling, and now we went to remote ensembling. And then 2 weeks ago, we had a visitor in person. And so I did in-person mobbing for the first time since 2020. And what was so strange to me was that it was almost seamless, like the difference between remote and in-person ensembling.
All right.
Like I didn't
really
even notice, like going back and forth between the two. And I think it was like several hours into it that I was like, oh, we're doing in person, and I haven't even really noticed, And so it's so for me, in-person and ensembling or in-person work versus remote work, they're almost interchangeable for me. But I know that's just me. And there's been other people who have struggled with it more, and they're like, oh, I really value the face-to-face time. I was recently talking with a coworker who he really enjoys remote ensembling and remote work, but he was just like, and he was making references to, we'd be in a large meeting and you could see someone, making a joke or making a gesture or something like that. And so we ran an experiment using a remote tool called GatherTown, and he said that really helped. Have you ever seen the same sort of thing with teams you work with, where they maybe the remote's working, but they miss a piece of in person. And have you run any experiments there?
I haven't run any experiments, I have to say.
Okay.
But I know that the more of an observation of what you were saying is that one of the things I found, and this has been confirmed by people I've spoken to in a totally ad hoc and unscientific survey, is that mobbing is not as tiring as meetings on screen remotely.
Yeah.
it doesn't have
100%.
It doesn't have the same, and I think it's because we're kind of focusing on the code. So, the other thing is, and I think part of the thing is that developers tend to have a lot of screens, and remote working, you need a lot of screens. Yes. Because it's the number of people is like, oh, I've got to move back, and you can't. It's really hard to do ensembling with one laptop screen. That would be really hard, I think. So I think so there's that aspect, is that it's not as tiring. I think there is still an opportunity for tooling. It's hard to have a side conversation online. So when you're sitting in the queue waiting for the observers, and you're waiting for your chance to become navigation, you can kind of have all those little conversations. It's hard to do that online. So, but I think as the tools evolve, so there's quite a cool meetings tool from Netscape. No, yeah, people who builds Firefox. That's Netscape, isn't it? Anyway, and that one, you walk around with your little avatar inside a room, but as you get near a group of people, the noise gets louder. So the conversation is spatially correct. Yes. So you can walk the room and you can hear conversations and decide which one to gravitate to. So something like that might be interesting if you actually had if you sort of had your ensemble as actually sitting, you sort of could look at them. This is where we're sitting in the virtual space, and then the person next to me, I can have a conversation with, and that'll be quite quiet compared to everybody else. Yeah. So I can see those sorts of tools evolving.
I did have the experience of having those side chats, and especially in the navigator role. Lately I've been finding myself a lot just sending direct chats to the person that it's navigating, even and especially if they're stuck, just saying, what would you do to get the driver to do this, and so I'll do Socratic questioning over chat message for the person in the navigation role, and that's been surprisingly effective, I think, in the few times that I've done it.
Yeah, I was just say, interesting, the gig I'm currently on, they've stymied that because they've turned off chat in Zoom for security reasons. So so it's just like,
with chat, you're totally capable of doing those side conversations, and I think it's immensely valuable. Especially in the sense of giving hints or even sending reference architectures. So before, when I would be in person, I would lean over and say, do this and this and this, and I'm kind of whispering off to the side, and it's kind of in the way. But you can send an architectural diagram over chat and say, what's the next thing you'd navigate if you wanted to change the way these things connect. So I've had a couple of experiences like that. I think that chat is, it's quiet, it's easily accessible, those sorts of things, but it is also distracting. So receiving a chat while you're navigating is a little bit painful. So I find it really useful to say, hey, I'm going to be navigating the navigator over chat. And so if you want help with the direction you're going, take a look at your chat. And if not, you can just ignore me. And that's been really helpful.
Yeah, I can see that would be, and the other thing is having your third screen, ideally, with an architecture diagram on it or some kind of drawing tool on it. I mean, one of the things actually I haven't got it set up at the moment, but is actually having a drawing tablet. It's a really valuable tool for remote working, where you can actually because drawing with a mouse, so it's so again, it's one of these things. Oh, didn't realize that's an important tool, but actually just got one of my bugbears for remote working. So Mural and Miro, wonderful as they are one of the great benefits of having a whiteboard in an office is if you leave the output of your discussion on the whiteboard, everybody can see it.
Mm-hmm.
With Miro and Mural, if you leave the output from your discussion on your canvas, it's gone. It's just, I mean, and you can't search them, and you can't search them across the organization. So it's even worse than Confluence for losing information. At least in theory, you might be able to find, probably conferences, you find the 17 versions of the thing because everybody's had an idea over the last 5 years. But it is a really, I personally feel it's a massive issue, is that Mural and Miro lose it. It actually, it's like with I think there's going to be roles turning up for remote working that aren't there at the moment. So the organizational librarian or the extended archivist role, not because you've got to write documents, but because you've got to curate them and put them on display so people can see them, to avoid silos. So I think that's
information radiators are extremely important
because they're hard remote because you've got to go. I mean, I think information. I should do this sometime, but I think screensavers, which will automatically take you to your teams,
as your retrospectives on them,
or just your burn or whatever your charts you're using, or just to have those on your screens, just so you can see what's going on.
We use Microsoft Teams to coordinate all of our work. And what's nice about the Office 365 subscription is that you get things like Microsoft Planner included in that. And so you can have Kanban boards, retrospectives, all embedded in the different meeting areas. And then you can see the ensembles by the little camera icon and the people that are in that ensemble. So we have a lot of information radiators around, as well as even video from our internal stream service. And so as you click on tabs and as you click through all of the different chat channels that also host the ensembles, you have at the top options to view like an architectural review video and a Microsoft Planner board that has all of the different Kanban material on it. And it's all integrated together. So that's been pretty good for that. I do understand the pain point though of walking by something and having a memory triggered by it in the office just doesn't really happen anymore. But I think one thing that has helped a lot with that is when we've done cross-team lean coffees, this idea that you get people from different teams all into a lean coffee together and just talk about things. So those have been helpful too. Yeah,
lean coffee is a great remote working support, enabler. I think is fun, and we push that a lot. I mean, so at the gig I'm currently on, they were running up to a big thing, and we basically said, look, I will do an Ask Me Anything twice a day. So it's just because they were classic remote working enterprise. Everybody was thoroughly, completely back-to-back meetings, 2 meetings in every slot. I have to do this a lot now. I have to do calendar management sessions with my people, saying, we just go through. So hi, we're doing a one-to-one. Let's have a look at your calendar. Right, you've got 3 meetings in every time slot, and you haven't replied whether you're going to any of them. What is with that? And we just go through. It's like, have you ever done that with the backlog when you've just gone through with a bug backlog and said, that's too old, I just deleted bugs. No, that's gone. You got my heuristic. It's more than 3 months old. It's gone. It's all gone. And then you get these like, we had 3,000 things in the backlog and now we've got 30. You're a hero. We love you. I'm not here. I'm just not scared.
Yeah.
Because it's not my problem.
Delete them all. Yeah.
I guess, yeah, but similarly with, it's just, are you going to go to that meeting? Probably not. Well, delete it. Tell them you're not going.
Yeah.
All that's, anyway, sorry, that's completely off the point, but it's one of these remote working things where, because people put loads of meetings in your diary, anyway, because their diary is really full. So we did an Ask Me Anything, which is like, you don't have to come, it's in your diary, drop in. And we got this little community. It was like a lean coffee, effectively, except we didn't run it. We even ran it like a lean coffee sometimes. But those things are really vital for remote working. Those unscripted, people can say, we don't want a meeting where we just talk. So why not? That's what you do with a water cooler.
Yeah.
So it's like, but they will be working. Well, you don't work when you make your coffee or go to the canteen, or, we need those. And actually, you can do those online, it turns out. And there's a load of really clever people who've done lots of work with this, and I was going to name their names and I've forgotten them. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff you can do with that. So I think remote working is really valuable. I think it's here to stay. Simon Wardley made a good point. He said people don't like change. It takes a big, I'm summarizing. If you have a big event, people will rise to the occasion. And that's what we did when COVID started. We all, oh my God, we're going to have to work remotely. Let's work remotely. Fine. Boom. All of those, we can't do it for this, we can't do it for that. Well, we have to do it, so let's do it. And now it's like, now we're all going to go back to the office. It's like, no. I've been working like this for 2 years. I quite like it. Or not even I like it, I'm used to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's with us to stay, and I think we are finding better ways to work.
Yeah.
And we're developing the tools. And in terms of developers, I think ensembling either as a full-time way of working, or at least a regular pattern to align your team, is going to become a go-to tool in most teams' toolbox.
Yeah. And what I love is that it's a world of a lot of experimentation, and in our internal open spaces, we've been doing a lot of that for remote work. And I'm not selling this tool, so I don't have get any proceeds from it. But we've been experimenting a lot with GatherTown, and I know I've heard of others we've had on the show before as well. And what's quite incredible about it is a lot of those in-person things you recreate, because what someone did is took the map of the building we used to be in and made it in GatherTown, and you could walk around to the different ensembles going on, and you would run into the people in the hallway. You would accidentally stumble in a room and overhear a conversation and then say something. We actually gave people the ability to build, so they could start building and making their own spaces and stuff. And you could have a side conversation where you walk out of like the vicinity, and then you can have a side conversation and walk back in. And and so I think and that's probably just the tip of the iceberg of things that will keep coming. But
so there
some people really like it, and some people it's maybe too much like in person, and they like being in a small Zoom room where with the 3 people they want to be in with. But it's a fun world.
I think there was a tool that came out at the beginning of lockdown I saw, which was like that, but it was really expensive. So that's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm going to have a look at that. That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's free for like less than 100 people in there at once or something like that. So yeah.
How do they make money?
Question.
I honestly don't understand how some of these, maybe cool. Anyway, good for them.
I mean, so I think that it's all related to, this is an emerging thing, and there's probably other monetization models to come, but I think they're just trying to figure out the right thing to build. But I think it'd be good for us to kind of move on to like recapturing the Agile Magic, and so maybe what thoughts did you have there?
Well, so I've been involved in a lot of agile transformations for my sins, and the magic's gone. You look at it, and I was on C2 in the late 90s, watching Ron and Kent and Alistair and all of them have their discussions, and occasionally posting my own thoughts, and then we went off and did not exactly agile, but we used a lot of agile techniques, and it was awesome. It was like we were, it was like having superpowers. And my wife has reminded me several times, says, you were so stressed. You were so stressed all the time. You were, yeah, that's true. And I remember Ken Schwaber saying a long time ago, agile doesn't fix any of your problems. It just tells you you've got them much earlier than anything else does, which is really valuable. You get that early feedback. You can fix them before you've actually driven off the road. But we were doing amazing things, and we were an empowered, self-organizing team, which I ran. But it was, and then something happened, and it's all about backlogs and refinement and prioritization and velocity and how's your Jira set up, and what's your workflow, and where's your dashboard, and how do we feed those metrics up to the senior leadership team? And it's like, that's not what it's about. It's not about that anymore. And I'm not sure why. I've got a lot of theories why, but obviously you need to work it out. But it's like, but it's basically the culture clash between a hierarchical organization. I mean, I haven't worked in a startup. I've helped with some. There are some weird startups. There's some startups without any IT people. There's startups that outsource all their IT startups that outsource all their IT. Mm-hmm. And you sort of think, okay. And we go to help them because they're in real trouble. Because you can't do that, it turns out, not effectively. Anyway, but so I haven't worked in a startup team, so I don't know what the culture's like there. But certainly in the enterprises that they ask us, we'd like to have an agile transformation, please, so we can go faster. It's like, okay, that's a bad start, but okay. But and they're not interested in the magic that happens, and the team members don't get to experience it. And agile without the magic is just like micromanagement. So I was heartbroken a couple of years ago. I went to the first remote DevOps Enterprise Summit, and Kat Svettel was talking, and we're talking about whether DevOps was a reaction to agile or a extension of agile. And she said it was a reaction against agile, or she had a theory. And somebody in the audience shouted out, in Twitter. I remember them shouting out, but it must have just been in the Slack channel, actually. But what they said was, agile is the evil empire. And I thought, when did that happen? That's just so sad. But then I go into all these organizations, they've got SAFe, and they've got big Kanbans, and they've got things coming down, and they're just crushing the life out of it. And you can absolutely see it is the evil empire. And I know we talk about dark agile and the agile industrial complex and all of the sort of the nastiness and that sort of thing, but there is something. So Mike Burrows, have you heard of Agenda Shift? Oh, you should look up Agenda Shift. It's really cool. But what he talks about is outcomes over solutions. So work out what your outcomes are. What outcomes do you want as an organization? And actually, one of the key things I've seen with a lot of these organizations is that from a very high level in the organization, they don't have a good grasp of their strategic vision. They don't have that intent that you can then cascade down the organization. So OKRs, when they're working properly, are not, here's the work you have to do. It's like, this is our need we have of your area. Work out how you're going to do it. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but this is the outcome I need from you. And that doesn't happen. And if that doesn't happen, if you don't think about the outcomes first, Mike calls it right to left, it all becomes about, where's your backlog? How many items are in it? How fast are you processing them? And that's when it goes. And I think the fix for that is this thing that Mike talks about, this outcomes before solutions. What outcomes do we want before which? So Chris Bramley, who's a coach I've worked with a couple of times, he talks about Jeopardy consulting. Is that his thing, or is that just, have you heard that phrase? So Jeopardy consulting is, here's the answer, what was the problem? You know.
Nice.
And that's exactly what SAFe and the big consultants are doing. It's like, we've got our framework, this is the solution you need. Well, how do we hammer it into your organization so it fits?
Yeah. Not
what is the outcome your organization is trying to achieve.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the Pygmalion effect, right? So like your boss tells you like, hey, I need you to, you're in charge of leading our agile transformation, right? And then you have to, as somebody that is reporting, maybe a middle level leader in an organization, you're responsible for finding something that upper management will agree with, and then the people kind of doing the work don't necessarily have a choice. It just has to sell well, right?
Yeah.
And so Pygmalion effect maybe is like reinforcing positive things, used in like a positive reinforcement. But I think it also can, it's like, I'm trusting you to do this, and so now you have this idea that like, okay, now I'm the one responsible for it, and I need something that I can communicate back up to my upper management that is maybe well known, right? And so the most well-known frameworks become the most easily sold frameworks, right? And so this could be disastrous for a team. And I think a lot of the stuff of like the servant leadership type stuff is really good, and sometimes palatable to organizations, but you're right, it's it will be very much the Jeopardy consulting, especially if somebody's been set up in such a way where now it's their responsibility to solve the problem that even their management may think they have. Maybe they don't even have that problem, and now they're fitting it into a framework in order to do that, right? It's a lot of this like problems that come straight out of the command and control style of work, and for sure, a lot of that cascades.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, and I tried this I have to be a bit careful about this because your clients don't like you doing it. So why do you want to do an agile transformation? It's like, well, we want to go faster with better quality. So but what are you going to do with it? We're going to go faster with better quality. Yeah, but what does your organization do with it? When you're going faster with better quality, then what happens? It's like, and then you go to their mission statement. What's your corporate strategy? We're going to do the biggest in this sector, and we're going to be. That's not a strategy. That's an aspiration. What are you going to do with this stuff? And then you discover there's this massive void about what are the outcomes we want for our organization, and that nobody's filling them. And I think that then means that you can't empower your teams to do things because you don't know what you want them to do. I mean, this is where I think Amazon did do a great job, is that while they were going off in all directions, but at least they had this idea of what they were trying to, that they could act on their own and deliver something. But anyway, so that's why the leadership is language, the new one by that's just such a he's a great, he reads it, so I listen to it on Audible, but that's such an inspiring book. His stuff is all great. But there's another one called The Art of Action, which is about strategic thinking, and that's they work very well together. But this idea that the organization needs to adapt to use its agility effectively is something organizations most senior leadership teams that I've met don't really want to change. You go and say, we'd like you to change our organization, please. And so, well, how are you going to change? No, change the organization, please. So, and that's and everybody recognizes that's a problem, but people still do it.
Yeah. And so for me, what's interesting is when I first became, I think it especially hit me big when I first became aware of the agile technical practices. Experiment with them, and then the magic you were talking about, like I literally was like dumbfounded, like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Like that, maybe that experience you were first talking about, and when you first experienced it. And we are getting close to time, but maybe one more before we close. One more question before we close is, if is there an experiment you would suggest or an action someone to take to, they find themselves in the evil empire or whatever, to recapture that agile magic? Do you have any action?
It's really hard. It's really hard because you're quite often heavily locked in to what you can achieve. So the thing that really unlocks it is, so I sort of often refer to as delivery as a risk management technique. By delivering stuff, you manage the risk. Because it's delivered, it's in production, it's deployed, and the small batches. And then if you can deploy frequently and get that feedback, people start trusting you. And then the conversation about, oh, you can't have this as quickly as you wanted it, becomes a lot easier, because it's like so that trust buildup happens, and that goes back to the safe spaces and the psychological safety. So I think it's hard to suggest an experiment because I don't know the context, but if you can get to a point where you can deliver faster, even if you're not delivering very much, if you can just deploy, you've got to reduce the transaction cost of deploying. That's what you've got to do. So I think if I was going to suggest an experiment, I think I would ask the change approval board how many I would ask them to refine their approach so that they can let more things through, rather than have a blanket no. Become an enabling bureaucracy rather than a constraining bureaucracy. And at an organization level, that's what I say. And I think at the team level, it's really hard because it depends on your context. Sometimes you just can't deliver stuff because it takes 4 months to get everything lined up, ready to go. But and I think I had a thought, but it's gone. I think the other thing is I would talk about, and this is something I put on the list, is work out how your people work. So I went to a talk, and it was Esther Darby and Joanna Rothman, and Joanna Rothman was saying, they're talking about how you think, and Esther Darby said, I have to think before I speak. And Joanna Rothman says, I have to speak in order to think. And actually that is true. I have to speak in order to think. Some of the things I've been saying, they're probably in my mind somewhere, but I haven't crystallized them out as thought until I was actually saying them to you. So I work really badly. I'm not a good developer when I'm working on my own. I know, seriously, I'm not. I get tied up in knots and I can't work things out, and I get really tense, and I'm frightened of experimenting. I'm a great developer in a group. On the other hand, there are developers who are really good developers on their own and hate being in a group. So this is the working out how you like to work in a team and how the team likes to work with you is really important, because because I don't want to exclude. So it's not a fear, because it's never going to happen. My fear is that we're all going to go to ensembling, and there's a bunch of people who really, really work best on their own. They're going to become, so at the moment we've got an environment where the people who work best on their own are in charge because they just produce loads of stuff and they're usually very clever. And the people who like working in groups are not allowed to work in groups. You're not allowed to share, there's organizations where you're not allowed to pair. But so, and similarly, there's organizations. So Basecamp, I remember saying they try and do as much asynchronous work as they possibly can. It's all done by emails and documents, and they have synchronous meetings very occasionally when they actually have to. On the other hand, you've got places that are just full-time remote ensembling. And I don't know whether there'll be a shakeout. People will move to the organization that works the way that works best for them, or we're going to work out a way to make it work. And I don't know how certain types of neurodiversity play with certain ways of working. But I think that's something we've really got to start working on, because it's critical to make sure we don't leave people behind when we do this stuff.
We've
got a history. We've got a history of leaving people behind in this business. So
exactly. And that's what I love about invitation. Like, hey, I want to go ensemble. If you don't want to go, that's great. Do your thing, and we'll sync up, in a couple hours or whatever, And I think I love that. Making it work for everybody is a great phrase. And but we are coming up on time, so thanks for sharing your thoughts. It's been a lot of fun, Tom. This has really been a great conversation. But before we close, is there any one last thing you'd like to share with our audience?
No. I'd love to. If you're into coding and you want to have a look at some really cool technology, go and have a look at what they're doing in the Elixir community. It's a really friendly community, and they are Brooklyn Myers. He does the Elixir newbie, and he's doing he does a regular ensemble type event on Saturdays. I'm not sure what time it is. Saturday evenings for me. So that's really exciting. And I think I'll just leave it there. Going up, because in terms of remote working, and in terms of, there's some interesting stuff going on there.
Fantastic. And maybe we'll get a link to that in the show notes. And to our audience, thanks for watching, listening. Please like and subscribe, give us feedback, YouTube, Twitter, and more. And really looking forward to continuing the conversation. And until next time, have a good one. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. It's been a blast. Bye.